Thank you, Mr. Chairman Gallagher, as well as Ranking Member Krishnamurthy, and I want to thank this evening's witnesses for being with all of us tonight. Just last week, the United States Department of Agriculture forecasted that in 2023, the U.S. would run a record $14.5 billion trade deficit on food and agricultural products. China will remain and has been one of our most significant markets for U.S. agricultural products. However, similar to what we heard from Mr. Paul in his testimony, China has and will continue to treat our American farmers and ranchers unfairly with significant tariffs as well as non-tariff trade barriers. The bottom line is China does not play by the global rules on trade. You might already know this, but entities associated with the PRC as well as the CCP have made and continue to make investments in U.S. agricultural land and assets. Some of the proposed purchases are in close proximity to national security assets. And obviously this is not a good trend for U.S. agriculture, and as I've always said, that food security is literally national security, which could not be more true today than at any point in history. So my question I'll direct to General McMaster first. How concerned are you by the CCP-backed purchases of American agricultural land and those potential purchases near strategic sites such as military installations or critical infrastructure? And then a second part of my question, I don't know if you were involved with CFIUS decisions in your previous role as National Security Advisor, but do you think that CFIUS has the statutory authority to block and should block land purchases by the CCP on national security grounds?
Thank you for that. Thank you for that question. I think I'm very concerned about that, about the purchase of lands and buildings next to sensitive sites. It's extraordinary the degree to which the Chinese Communist Party has pursued a massive campaign of espionage. That's one facet of it. The other aspect, I think, that what you're getting at as well is the dependency on Chinese investment, which then gives them really coercive power. I describe in my written testimony the 3 C's of co-option, coercion, and concealment. Co-opt by trying to build dependencies from U.S. agriculture on the Chinese market. And then, hey, once you're in, then to use that for coercive purposes. The commercial aspect of this is often tied to the United Front Work Department, an arm of the Ministry of State Security, which forms organizations that look innocuous, that promote U.S.-China dialogue and economic discourse in the area of agriculture, in particular in the American heartland. But those are organizations that are designed to advance the PRC's agenda. And then, co-option, coercion, and then to conceal all of this as just normal business practices. So I think you're quite right to be concerned about this, Congressman Newhouse, and I think what you're doing, what the committee's doing to pull the curtain back and shine the light on this behavior, I think is the most important first step.
I appreciate that. Ms. Tong, in the time that I have remaining, and thank you very much for your moving testimony, someone who has lived through a repressive regime in China. In your written testimony, you touch on the courageous individuals in China who participated in the white paper protests just last fall. Could you talk a little bit about what was both similar and different in these protests compared to maybe previous dissident movements in China?
On the similarities, both Tiananmen movement and the white paper protest were massive and took place in many large cities. In both cases, young protesters very, very idealistic and felt it's my duty to stand up for more rights and against the totalitarian regime. On differences, the Tiananmen movement lasted for more than 50 days. And the white paper movement just lasted a few days, a couple of days. And the difference is due to the CCP's enhanced surveillance capabilities today, and its vastly greater police manpower. The number of the white paper protests was smaller than the 1989 participants. But in light of the enhanced surveillance capacity by CCP, their individual courage, I would say, was greater than the Tiananmen generation. And for the cases that came to light, more women were detained this time than men, it seems, and it is the first time in China. I also want to state this point. Recently, the Chinese government announced it has won a victory over COVID. In fact, the victory should belong to these white paper protesters, whose number one demand was to get rid of the zero COVID policy. So they achieved the result, while the Tiananmen student movement did not. Now, the CCP is trying very hard on the internet and on social medias to erase people's memories about their draconian zero COVID policies and measures. If this is not what the white paper protest victory, what should we call it?
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, and I appreciate all of you being here and helping educate us and the American people the challenges that we face from the Communist Chinese Party. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Mr. Carson is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Ranking Member. And this question is for everyone. How